Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. Hope you are having a fabulous week and a fabulous Wednesday. The wine I'm sipping on is Chardonnay, as per usual. That's my go to anymore. And I've got Holly, Ray, and Cheryl with me. Tonight is just open chat, so bring on the questions. We'll sit here and conversate as we always do. But if you ask a question in the comment section, that's where we'll steer our attention to. Holly has something interesting going on this week. What's new, Holly?
My hair.
Let's make you big real quick.
I I just did it yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and it probably won't last for long because my hair is naturally tends to be blonde, and anytime I dye it dark, it fades very, very quickly. So I have the box. This is what I used. So you can see it's a lot darker than my hair, and it's intended to go on dark hair.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's so bright. But since my hair is blonder, it comes out brighter, but it also fades a lot faster. So it probably won't look the same next week unless I go get some manic panic or something temporary to kind of refresh it and keep it going.
Right.
But we'll see how long I enjoy it and how long I can stand the high maintenance of it.
And I'm looking at my hair and thinking, let's not point out the grays because I just need a real color, right? But no, that's cool. I was telling you before we started, I did my daughter's hair rainbow, and she has it. It's a good thing you're bringing up, like for any of the women that watch, how it's different if you have blonde hair or dark hair. We tried to do my daughter's hair, who has dark hair like mine. We tried to do this rainbow deal. It was some special occasion, and it didn't take because she had darker hair. We had to completely bleach her hair in order for the colors to show up the way that we wanted to. So it's a big ordeal if you're not lightheaded to. So that's interesting too to me though, Holly, that there's some for darker headed people. Like I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it comes out brighter is what it is
Gotcha.
if you're blonder or so that's why with some colors you want to bleach first and then
Mm-hmm.
apply color. Like in this case being a blonde, if I really was a stickler and wanted it to be that dark, I would dye it a darker first and then use that color. It's a
Gotcha.
two process. But because I'm not that picky and I know how my hair reacts to
Yep.
dark colors, because I've done that before, I was fine just using it straight from the box and seeing what I come out with. So I'm happy with it for now, but like I said, it's too high maintenance for me, so it
I
probably
never ever give a
won't
damn what
stay
my hair
this way.
color was.
Well,
I was
I was
gray.
gonna say,
I was gray by the time I hit 30. I can't remember when I hit the white mark, but I don't think it was too far after that.
sure. Sure. Well, I would say before we lose all the guys who come to Wine Wednesday and they're like, I don't give a shit about your hair. I want to say hello, Fish Fam Links. Don't forget, you can go to Fish Fam Links and find links to this channel and all the other cool reefing and saltwater channels. Don't miss checking them out. Hey Vince's Seahorses. Hey Zen. I think that's all I see so far. But hey guys, it's open chat again. So if we want to talk Holly's hair, that's what we're going to talk about. If you have a question about seahorses or want us to discuss something, put it in the comment section. But yeah, I love it, Holly. I think it's cool. I think sprucing up your hair makes you feel young, makes you feel good and you get a
Mhm.
little spunk in your life, right? So
Just a fun
yeah.
change now
And it
and
looks good
then.
on you. I like the color. But
Thank you.
anything new with you, Cheryl or Ray? You didn't change your hair, I can see. So,
No, just a new dog.
right? And I know you're dealing with that. Zen said, my hair is naturally red copper, and I actually bleached it and dyed it a color close to that, but a little more hot pink than magenta. But it's my favorite hair color. See, we
Very
need to see
cool.
Zen. Jump in.
Yeah,
I do that stuff
for sure.
too, but my kids, I've got 16-year-olds that tell me I'm like ancient, of course, and so I try to do something that makes me feel good, and they're like, "Mom, you're just acting old and being ridiculous," so so I
Just
don't get to
remind
do
them they're going to go through that stage too.
that's I try to. I certainly try to. And then
Well, tell him I'm older than you. If I can do it,
that's
you
what I'll
can do
tell them. That's what I will tell them. And guys, I did want to make a quick announcement real quick because I said something about it last week and then I kind of dropped the ball and didn't follow up. And Joanne, who runs Women in Reefing at different events, actually hit me up and made sure I am planning to go to Dallas. And no, not Dallas. I'm sorry. You know what? Let me find the actual documents before I start talking because I'll give the wrong information again. But I will be at Aquashella for the Women in Reefing event. So by the end of this stream, I will get you the dates and the times and everything. That being said, before we started, we were discussing lighting, and we were discussing lighting in a room, but we also moved tanks. And Ray, you said you never saw a difference between which lighting
I
on a
had
tank?
a 12,000 GE tubes, and comparing it to the 6500K, I couldn't see a difference. But I could see a difference in going from the 5 to the 65.
So what was the difference? And what did you see?
It
Why
was
did it
a little
matter?
bit whiter. In other words, there's more of the blue spectrum showing. But
In the
it was a bigger jump to go from that 65 to 12, but for some reason my eyes didn't detect much of a difference.
Well, and our eyes don't detect that stuff. In the reef tank, I mean, for all the reef keepers that watch and come in here, hey, Coral Works, that's you maybe. You get into talking lighting, and it's a deep topic when it comes to coral and the reef stuff. Whereas with seahorses, it's not that big a deal. Most of us don't even have lights over our tanks, or if we do, we're trying to minimize things like heat from the light. So we always go LED or color, because if you put a reef light over a seahorse tank and the blue that looks so pretty with coral, the seahorses don't look as good. I mean, did you notice that, Ray, as you went bluer, as you went higher on the spectrum?
I never used it over a seahorse tank.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And as a matter of fact, like my tanks, I started back in the early 90s when people were using metal halide.
Right.
And I didn't want to spend that kind of money. And so I built my own hoods and I put in GE Daylight Ultra, I think they were called back then. And you couldn't buy them in a store. I had to order it commercially and had to buy them by the box of 30, I believe it was. And then actinics. And so over a 90-gallon tank, for instance, I put 4 of the 6500Ks and 4 actinics. And that gave me a light that I was happy with. Other people said, well, you don't get the shimmer. And I said, well, I didn't care about the shimmer. So it's just a personal thing. If you want the shimmer, don't use fluorescent lights. But for
I
me,
didn't like the shimmer. I personally did not like the shimmer, and the shimmer makes it terrible for video and photos, in my personal opinion. Everybody, you're right, Ray. And this, I mean, I brought up lighting just, for something to chat about, but I don't in deep because people get really passionate about this conversation. I mean, people fight about this. There are people that still use T5s and say LEDs, no way, but they're talking about raising coral. And that's a whole different beast, right? Coral Works, I wanted to say 16, not 16s. I've got 2 twin 16-year-olds. Still a mess. Still the bathroom's crazy. But anyways, back to lighting. When I was
about 2 years after I started, I was posting on, I can't think of all the Reef
forums.
Central was the main one back then. But after I got posting on that and a few other people started trying it, next thing I know, you could buy those lamps singly or in pairs, just in regular stores. And so I don't know whether the fact that people in the reef started using them triggered a demand that made them put it out. But up to that point, what you had available in the stores was soft white or cool white. They didn't really have daylight at a 6,500 Kelvin.
Gotcha. Hey, Stephen, hang with us. I'm going to ask your question in 1 second. I just wanted to make a point, like when we're talking about lighting, that it does differ if you're, talking about a reef tank or seahorse tank. What Ray had available back then is different than what we have available today. And again, I'm not diving into the topic of which light's better. I'm just saying that in a reef, it does depend, as Ray said, if you like the shimmer, if you want more blue. But I just know in my seahorse tanks, I tried to reuse lights, right? And so I'd use like a reef light over a seahorse tank and just turn it way down so it wasn't growing algae because there was no coral in the tank, right? If I had in my macro tank, I used a freshwater plant light. So it totally depends on what you're growing. But in a seahorse, personally, I've just noticed that if you have a reef light or too much blue, the pictures are terrible. And Holly, I know you have a light where you change the lighting around to your specification.
Yeah, I have one that's got even different
Right.
fun colors where I just push button, I can make it green or red, or today I had it on yellow for a little while just to take some pictures, because with the yellow light on, it makes my tank look turquoise inside. And so once in a while I'll switch on a color to take pictures, but most of the time I leave it on really low, or I use like an overhead. Like in this room, I have an actual shop light hanging over the tank that I use to
Absolutely.
light it up.
And that's in my 40 gallon. In my 65 gallon, I've got the SB Reef light. And it is a saltwater light, but that's because I don't currently have, but want to have gorgonians and macros and all that in that tank. In the 40 gallon all one that I'm treating like a breeder tank, so it's completely artificial, and except for rock that's not, that I've recycled and added myself, except for rock, it's all artificial. And so what I care about is the tank looking nice, right? And being able to see the seahorses and the colors that are actually turning as they do whatever court or get next to different ornaments. And so in that tank, I tried to get like just a cheap reef light, one of the black boxes, right? But it was way too strong. And of course, I started having algae problems almost instantly. So now I literally have it on dimmer. So I turn the light on and then I turn it as low as it can go. No red, because algae loves the red spectrum. And the blue stays way low too. And I had to play with it. I couldn't give you the exact measurements. And I honestly wouldn't advise my exact measurements for your tank. Like, I hate when people say, here's the perfect measurements for your light, because it so depends on what you've got in the tank, what you're trying to do, because I'm interested in breeding, so the light doesn't even matter, but then pictures. And if you look at some of my previous pictures in this tank, they suck because I had the blue too high, and you can't see anything when it's all blue. You can't see their sparkles and their features. So again, just making the point that in a seahorse tank, it's different. And, you got to do what you want and figure it out, and nothing's required unless you have macros and gorgonians and or coral. Then you have to consider them and what they need, and that's a whole other ballgame. But I did want to jump in. Stephen asked, thoughts on pygmy seahorses for a complete beginner saltwater aquarist. Oh, no, wait, I think he meant to say not a complete beginner. Would a novice, someone who's been doing freshwater aquarist forever, but not saltwater, be good with pygmy seahorses? Thoughts?
I think he means dwarves,
I hope so.
not pygmies.
I hope so.
Pygmies are not available in the hobby. They're tiny. They're the size of your pinky fingernail. They're like, You can barely see them, and they're rare. They're not available. So I think I see a lot of people interchange the two. They'll say pygmy, but what they mean is
Right.
dwarfs. I'm pretty sure.
Nope. I'm glad you made that distinction because that's what I was thinking. I'm sure you mean Hippocampus zostrae, which are the dwarf seahorses, but the pygmies are a different thing altogether. The pygmies they tried to raise in the California Institute of Aquariums or whatever, and they were barely successful themselves. So definitely not pygmies. But dwarves, what are your guys' thoughts, Cheryl and Ray, before I
Real
give
quick,
mine?
Kelly, real quick. One of the things to remember, the pygmies are about the much as adults are about the size of a grain of rice,
Right.
whereas
Yeah.
the zostrias that are basically they're much smaller seahorse. They only typically get to a couple of inches, 2.5 inches or so. So they're also very small, but there's a huge difference because they can be excuse me, readily raised in captivity as opposed to the true pygmies, which to date no one has been able to raise to adulthood.
Right. And I wasn't calling you out or anything. I'm glad you asked the question because people do use that interchangeably. And I wanted to make sure anybody who watches later knows that we're not talking about pygmy seahorses, right? We're talking about dwarfs. But Ray, would you say that like for a freshwater advanced aquarist, would you advise their first dive into saltwater to be dwarf seahorses?
I would say it wouldn't matter whether he was advanced or not. I don't see any problem with anybody moving to dwarfs at any point, as long as they research first and find out what they're getting into.
Sure.
Because in some ways, it's a lot more work than keeping regular seahorses. Your standard ones, the only thing that's similar to it is raising the fry. If
Wait, did you just say raising or keeping dwarf seahorses is easier?
no,
Oh,
No,
okay,
he
okay,
said the opposite.
okay. I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure. I heard wrong. Go
it's
on,
not
Ray.
as
Sorry.
easy as keeping standards. And
Right.
the exception being if you're raising the fry of standards, then it's very similar to raising the fry when looking after the dwarfs. Only with the dwarfs or with the fry, after they get a few months or after about a month or so, 2 months at the outside, and when you start getting them onto frozen food, you don't have to keep hatching and enriching the brine shrimp. Whereas with dwarfs, they're going to live on average about a year and a
Always.
half, 2 years, and as long as they're alive, you got to keep doing that. And you have to.
And I agree with you. And CoraWorks made a great point, similar to yours, that keeping dwarf seahorses is very similar to raising fry with the tiny, tiny foods. And that's the key. It's if it's what you want to do, absolutely it's doable. I think that being an expert in freshwater aquarium keeping, I think that's actually a benefit. And I'll tell you why. Because you don't think you know when we get an advanced saltwater reef keeper, they come in and they think, I know all about water chemistry, I know all about everything, and so keeping seahorses will be a breeze. And they don't understand that they're right, but keeping seahorses is just very different. What you care about in a reef tank versus a seahorse tank is very different. Okay, so I think being a freshwater novice is actually beneficial because you understand that it takes a lot of learning and research, and you got to get figured out before you do it, before throwing animals in a tank, right? So I think that's a benefit because you don't think you know everything about keeping seahorses, but you know that it's important to know as much as you can, if that made sense. Also, with the dwarf seahorses, just building upon what everybody else has said, if someone asked me in a message, in life, whatever, I want to keep seahorses. I figure it'd be easier to keep the smaller dwarf seahorses because I don't need as much equipment. I can keep a smaller tank. All these reasons. They're little, they're cute, da da da. My personal answer would be you're crazy. Okay, because dwarf seahorses are literally like keeping fry that stay fry forever.
Right.
So you're talking
But
about,
they're
hang on,
Going
guys, hang on. Let me finish my ramble and then I'll let you all talk, I promise. But I'm not trying to say that anybody shouldn't keep dwarf seahorses. They're cute, they're doable, it's very easy, especially if you already have other systems in your house or whatever that you have to raise food for, because that's the key. For me, the hardest part about raising seahorse fry is that I have to keep the constant live food going, right? So keeping dwarfs, you have to keep the constant live food going. I personally am not good at cultures. Like I can hatch artemia, I can keep some copepods, but I'm not good at keeping that going long term. And with dwarf seahorses, you have constant live foods, whereas with an adult regular seahorses, you can just throw them some frozen food and it's much easier. So it kind of depends on what you want. Not saying you can't do it, but again, it's dwarf seahorses are like perpetual fry. What were you gonna say, Cheryl?
I was just going to say, keeping dwarf seahorses is a lot like perpetually raising seahorse fry, as you've already indicated.
Sure.
And that actually creates more work for the keeper and makes them harder to work with because you have to be so meticulous with what you're doing, including your food, your enrichment, and your tank maintenance. Whereas with the larger seahorses, if you set up a nice sized tank with a good filtration system, it really reduces your work. And I know a dear friend of mine who had seahorses for many, many years. She actually set up a 40-gallon tank, stocked it with several different types of shrimp, copepods, etc. And she was raising zots, as I call them, the dwarf seahorses. The primary difference was her pairs were producing, instead of the 3, 5, maybe 6 babies most people were getting out of a pair, hers were throwing out 17, 18, 19 kiddos at a time.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, it was the amount of work, and she had a huge background knowledge in keeping seahorses. And I consider zots to be harder to work with and definitely more work than working with like an erectus or a reed eye or any
Well,
of
you
the
made
other.
a great point, Cheryl, and I want to give Holly a chance to talk, but you made a great point, Cheryl, that also it's not just tank maintenance, but it's what you can keep in the tank. Because if you're talking about keeping dwarf seahorses, then every piece of macro, every piece of anything live becomes a risk, because an aptasia will sting an adult erectus and make them jump across the tank and piss them off, and it's not good, and you don't want it. But an aptasia in a dwarf seahorse tank is deadly.
That's
It will
dead.
literally eat it
They're dead.
completely. Hydroids. So my only, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I know many dwarf seahorse tanks that are amazing and are great. Just do your research, right? Make sure you understand things are more deadly to the little guys and they need live foods. Go ahead, Holly. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, well, if they're an advanced freshwater aquarist, they might already be raising
Maybe.
artemia for other fish and be familiar. If you're already doing it, it's not that much more work, I don't think. And just, like you guys were saying, the thing is with the dwarf seahorses, because so many tiny things like hydroids can kill them, you want to make sure you get them from a very safe, clean source, like one of the actual seahorse captive breeders, and make sure that anything that goes in with them is also sterile, clean, and not bringing in pests, because unlike the bigger seahorses, they can't handle much of anything.
Go ahead, Ray.
besides
each other.
each
Sorry,
other.
Holly. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah.
The thing
Hang
that
on,
I
Ray's
want to
turn.
bring up in my 21 years of seahorse keeping, I had contact with a lot of different, a lot of people that had different abilities or different experiences. And my experience with pretty well anybody that had prior aquatic experience, whether it's salt water or fresh water, and especially those that considered themselves in the upper echelons of looking after whatever they were looking after. They invariably had the thought in their heads that they weren't going to have any problem because they understood all about water quality. They knew about how the biological filtration and everything works. What they don't know, and it's very hard to convince them, that you can throw that all out the doors in some respects, because what's going to kill your seahorses, dwarf or standards, are things that you don't know about right now, and it's related to dissolved organics, which there are no tests for, and that you have to be proactive, not reactive, in order to give your seahorses a chance. But
Wait, no, you can't just so you can Ray, I do agree with you somewhat. We can't label all people, right? But I do agree it's harder to convince someone that thinks they and we're not saying that about you, Stephen, because you're coming here and asking a question. You're not saying you know everything. That's not at all what we're saying. But we have had people say, "Oh, I've kept reef tanks forever, or I've kept whatever forever, so I know what I'm doing." And they don't understand that seahorses are just different. But Ray, you have to expand upon that. You said what you don't get is that water quality still does matter. We care about ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, but things like calcium and phosphate, well, phosphate still matters, but calcium and magnesium, those things we don't even test for. And the things we can't test for that matter, can you dive into a little bit of how you make sure you don't have those problems? You said be proactive versus reactive. What do you mean by that?
well, there are a lot of different ways to accomplish it, and some people like to do it with a lot of high-tech equipment and everything. I'm a minimalist, and I'm a cheapskate, so I prefer to do it mainly through mechanical filtration and a lot of water changes and a lot of large water changes. But it can be done. You can reduce somewhat the numbers of changes you do, as long as you know that your filtration has to be changed and get the crap out before it starts decaying. And you can add things on like uh, a way oversized protein skimmer, which will help with dissolved organics, although it doesn't take out all of the dissolved organics. Carbon, on the other hand, you can put that in a reactor, and that'll take care of dissolved organics, and it'll also take care of the ones that the skimmer won't do. So
So let me ask.
some
Sorry,
people
go ahead.
like to use a mix of a
Let me finish.
skimmer plus a reactor.
So real quick, I guess what I'm trying to get at for just somebody who's never even thought about keeping seahorses that watches this is basically what you need to worry about that's different in a seahorse tank than a regular tank. Anyone, freshwater, saltwater, reef, don't care. The
Well, there
difference
isn't any
is
test that you can worry about because we don't
there's
have it.
no test. But my point is,
Now,
we
you have
keep
to watch
saying,
and be aware of when there's a change in the seahorses.
right? I know, right?
If it's
But
a
let me
change,
make this point real quick. Because I think when you say, oh, it's because it dissolved organics, a lot of people don't know what that means. Like I wouldn't if I didn't know you and I didn't know everybody that I know now. So I just wanted to make the quick point that what we're saying is usually in a tank, you've got, say, cleanup crew or something that's eating the stuff and doing something. You've got different ways that you make sure that the tank doesn't end up dirty, so to speak. Whereas in a seahorse tank, whether you've got cleanup crew or not, their immune systems are weaker, and so they just need cleaner water. Is that a good way to put it, you guys? I don't know how else to say it in basic terms.
I
Yeah,
think some
yeah,
people depend too much
totally.
on
And what I
cleanup.
was going to say is, at least in a dwarf tank, you're talking about a very small volume of water. So water changes are very easy for
Yeah.
for a dwarf
Right,
seahorse
but
tank.
the thing is, we're
Keep
saying on
going.
one hand, you need a much cleaner tank
Mhm.
in a seahorse tank. They just need cleaner water because if
Mhm.
anything multiplies, bacteria, anything multiplies, then you're going to have problems. Then on the other hand, we also say you got to feed them more. So that's the up and down, right? Because you have to feed seahorses more, whether
Yeah.
you're talking about dwarf seahorses that you're feeding live, or if you're talking about regular sized seahorses that you're feeding frozen, you have to feed them more, at least 3 times a day.
And I saw Steven is hatching brine
Right,
shrimp every
right.
day already.
Br- br-
So
I'm
he's
curious,
already doing.
Stephen, are you enriching them? I'm just curious if you're enriching them and why, and we can dive into that. But Ray, I think you wanted to say something else. We cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me
Hang
bring
on,
out
Cheryl.
a couple points real.
Okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay,
We
one
all
that
want to talk.
yes, you can grow or harvest copepods to feed. It's a far more nutritious food source than even enriched brine shrimp. And I do know I have a friend that set up a 40-gallon Zot tank, and she was the one that was getting close to 20 fry out of each brood. But again, they were also much larger because of the nutritional factors involved. That's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing is when you're dealing with something that's going to be basically they're going to live off of live food, you're making a commitment to have to grow out live food, whether it be copepods or brine shrimp. You're still going to have a continuous work, which you don't have to do with the larger seahorses that are eating frozen food. They can be fed krill and mysis shrimp, things like that. The other thing
Mine won't eat that stuff, but go ahead.
the other thing that happens is if a Zot tank gets infected with flatworms, aptasia, anything like that, those will all prove lethal to the tiny seahorses.
So I think what you're saying, Cheryl, is if you're going to set up a Zosteray tank, which is the hippocampus zosteray, which is the dwarf seahorses, make sure you start with a clean slate. Like, don't use anything from another tank that might have hydroids or stuff that doesn't affect that other tank. It's not a big deal, right? Maybe don't use live stuff. Maybe use artificial. Most of the dwarf seahorse tanks I've seen have used artificial. Some, I know Cindy, who's huge on Instagram, she did a dwarf tank with a bunch of gorgonians, but they were the type of gorgonians that didn't have everything has the capability of bringing things in, but she had a method to dip them and make sure that they were safe. So I agree with your point, Cheryl. If you're doing Zosteray, you got to be careful and start out right and not use anything from other tanks. And I was going to and Zen's question about keeping a colony of copepods, that like maybe a whole other tank for dwarves or even fry, or do the seahorses eat readily enough to survive? The problem with that is, here's the thing, and Dan used to say this all the time.
It's so many.
You're talking about each little tiny seahorse will eat like 1,000 a day. And you grow copepods and you're like, oh, I've got a whole barrel full. They'll eat them.
They'll be gone.
So it's just about quantity, I guess. Like if you can grow enough, absolutely that would work. I mean, I know people who've done it for sure. And then also I would mention, if you do keep the larger species, I've never had an adult Erectus, Reedi, Cuda, or Barbori go after a copepod. They're just too small. No. They won't go after them. Dwarfs are a different thing. Fry are a different thing. Dwarfs,
yeah.
But
Steven's asking if hatching Artemia daily wouldn't be sufficient. No, it will be. Yes. If you hatch daily, what we do is, though, we clean them first with peroxide before feeding, and also enrich them so that, right, for dwarves.
Hang on. What was the question? Because I want to put it up.
So he says, so you're saying that just hatching Artemia daily would not be sufficient?
Not without enrichment.
And you enrich it, right? Even for dwarves, unless, will they, if you fresh hatch Artemia and feed them right away, don't they still have that sac? Is that all right for dwarves?
Well, there's a catch to that, and I'm going to let Ray tackle that because Ray knows about the N-star and all of that. But there's a catch where literally you have to get the exact precise moment before when they've lost their shell,
Ah,
but they still have the egg. And like if you
gotcha.
hatch Artemia, do you really know when they hatch, or do they hatch at different times? Ray, you go ahead.
I see. So enrichment
Go
is
ahead, Ray.
safer.
The other thing
Wait,
that
hang
real
on.
quick to keep in mind.
Hang on. I wanted Ray
What
to say
what
something.
part do you want me to go ahead on?
N star. Like,
Well, an
The
instar,
brine
instar
shrimp,
one,
to
they don't have
make
a
sure
full
they're
so
digestive tract.
the question
So
was,
you have,
can you just newly hatch Artemia every day and provide the nutrition that dwarfs need?
well, like I posted there, it'll work for some, but longevity and success is better if you're going to enrich them. And the enrichment is a 12-hour stage for the instar 2, not like a later instar where you can do it in 4 or 5 hours, or when they're full adults you can do it in a couple hours. But with instar 2, it's going to take 12 hours just to gut load them. And if you change the water with new enrichment and do it a further 12 hours, then it'll not only be gut loaded, the nutrient will now be assimilated into the flesh of the naplee.
So
And
real quick. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
but that's a heck of a lot better than just having them gut loaded.
So it's good. It's bet. I think my overall understanding is newly hatched brine shrimp are going to be more nutritious, period, than just Artemia that's been sitting there for a day. However, when you enrich, what you're saying is if you're able to grow the Artemia, enriching them at a later life stage of the Artemia is easier because you have to do it for less time, right?
Well, the other part is too, though, if you hatch a bunch of cysts, and when you go to harvest them, that hatch has taken place maybe over 10, 15 hours.
Right.
It started before you actually do your harvest. So unless you're going to harvest every half hour or something from when they first start to when they're completed, you're going to have all different stages of nutrition in that egg sac. The ones that harvest or hatch the earliest are no longer going to have near as much.
Sure.
But on top of that, those egg sacs have a lot of EPA. They don't have DHA.
And DHA is what
DHA
seahorses
is
need.
important for seahorses. They cannot manufacture their own.
So wait, I
So
have
will
one more.
the
Wait, hang
dwarves
on.
eat an adult brine
I was
shrimp
gonna just
or only the
Holly, I
babies?
think we just had the same question and we talked over each other, so I'm gonna repeat it. So will dwarf seahorses eat adult Artemia that have been enriched? Was that your question too, Holly? I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eat adult.
Yes.
Will they eat adult Artemia or just babies?
Well, I generally, after I first started with dwarfs, I found a pain in the ass to keep hatching out every day. So what I did, I hatched out enough to last me about 10 days because they don't grow enough in 10 days to become too big for a dwarf. But it meant that I still had to do the enrichment, but I would have a culture sitting there and I would feed them over that 10 days so that they're not losing any ground really. But I would take out just what I need for the day, enrich that, feed that, and but that would be the next day because I'm doing a full day of enrichment.
Mm-hmm.
So when I
Mhm.
finish one batch, I'm starting another one. So each day I'm doing enrichment, but I'm not doing the hatching every day.
And Cora Works, I see another question that I'm going to bring up after we get done with the Sartini conversation. But Cora Works said, do you just enrich them with DHA or are you adding spirulina and things to feed, gut load them, the Artemia?
Yes, I feed them personally. I use
Selco? No.
Algamac 3050, which is
Yeah.
basically,
Algamac.
let me get my thoughts around this. It's a, maybe I can find it here, just a sec here.
You don't have to get all technical. It's good for DHA, right?
Schizochytrium algae.
Okay.
That's that's basically what Algamac 3050 is. Now, a lot of people don't have any access to that, so look for the Celco or Celcons. I forget which one now has a high DHA product. The only problem with the Celcons, there's very few that can access the powder, and the emulsions don't last very long. They
Yeah.
smell bad to begin with, but believe me, when they turn on it on you a little bit after that, it's a lot worse. And then it's not going to do any good for anything you're feeding it to.
So wait,
And
you're
Very
saying
short
that it
life.
goes bad quickly, so don't buy a lot,
And it's
buy a
very
little.
short
Okay.
yeah,
half-life.
and the problem is so many stores don't even keep it refrigerated. They have it sitting on a peg or a shelf, and you're buying it, and it's already deteriorating because it hasn't been refrigerated.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So only buy refrigerated. Look for Celco or Celcon or the Algamac 50. But do you also, like, if you're raising Artemia to keep dwarf seahorses long term, you don't feed that, you don't enrich the food every feeding, right?
No,
Okay.
but you can that way. At that way, if you're feeding them, say I use spirulina. I used the spirulina powder, and I bought it from Brine Shrimp Direct because they were the cheapest place to get quality product.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that if you talk to them at Brine Shrimp Direct, they may even sell you some of the Schizzochitrium because they use some of that in a lot of the food powders that they make up for fish food for people.
Well, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to call them. Go ahead and finish, Ray. So you use spirulina, and what I mean,
I
like,
use
is there a
yeah,
process?
I always had the spirulina, and I put some of the Algamac 3050 or the
Celco.
Schizzochitrium.
Mhm.
I mix some of that in too, so that at any time I could grab something out of there, sterilize it, throw it in, and didn't have to worry about sitting there and enriching it, going through an enrichment process. Because basically these adults that I was culturing, well, I kept what 1, 2, 3. I guess I had 4 26-gallon Rubbermaid containers
Mm-hmm.
that I was growing these in, and so at any time I could take some out, and they were already enriched, so I just had to sterilize them with the peroxide and then feed them to whatever.
Which I was
But
gonna say,
that's no good for dwarfs or for fry.
yep, I was gonna say, diving into sterilizing them afterwards with peroxide. I'm guessing, like, as a freshwater aquarist, that's maybe, I don't know, but that's like a whole other topic that we absolutely can dive into. But when we say, like, you need cleaner stuff for seahorses, that's one of the keys. Is that one little extra step where you use peroxide to clean them after enrichment? Is key. Holly, go ahead. You've been waiting.
I was going to say for enrichment too, there's actually a ready-made enrichment for seahorses that Alyssa's Seahorse Savvy sells
There
for
you
the
go.
dwarves to gut load Artemia. And I use that. I'm not sure if there's a different one for fry raising or if it's the same one. But when I was raising fry, I bought my enrichment from her because I only needed a
Sure.
small amount. And like Ray was saying, most of these enrichments seem to come in large containers and they go bad quickly. So there are like some captive breeders that make their own enrichment mixes that will sell them to you, to customers.
One thing,
So
And I'm going
as
to check
well.
with
one
Brine
thing I
Shrimp
wanted to
Direct
point
too,
out.
because that's a good tip to actually ask them if they'll sell it. And Cheryl, go
Mhm.
ahead. I have one more thought, but go ahead,
Mhm.
Cheryl.
Okay. What I was going to say is we're discussing primarily feeding baby brine shrimp. Some of the amphipods that we can now get, Apocyclops panamensis is one of them. They can grow in the same vast numbers and with the same speed as brine shrimp. The primary difference is these are a saltwater species. so they don't lack the DHA and EPA that so many other enrichments do, because they're specifically designed for working with this species. I have propagated them. I was breaking down a tank several months ago to clean, and I got a little behind. Next thing I know, I got a tank full of copepods. I've got a
Yep.
tank full of those boogers. And I mean, they grow so fast. If you're looking to get into dwarf seahorses, I would highly recommend you get with Chad Clayton. They're at what is it? They changed
Reef
their name a while
Nutrition.
back.
Reef Nutrition.
Yeah, it used to be another one, but anyway, or there's several others that sell them. They are very easy to raise. They're very easy to raise in huge numbers, and they are highly nutritious, unlike many other items.
So just to recap what Cheryl just said, because it was great information. If you do go the copepod route, you're going to need a lot of them, as we pointed out. But if you're willing to culture them, not just buy them and feed them, you've got to culture them and culture a lot of them. But if you're willing, the reason that they're better for the seahorses is because they already have that DHA. They don't even need enriched. You can just feed them. They also, the species Cheryl's talking about from Chad Clayton at Reef Nutrition or Reed Mariculture is the two names. The reason that it's so great is because you can culture them without having to also culture their food, right? They will eat the paste. They will eat.
They will eat.
Yeah.
They'll eat
algae paste.
Frozen, basically coral food. They'll eat just about anything. They're not picky.
So you
if
don't
you look at
have
the little
to culture. You
I
don't
used to
wait,
feed them outside in
out.
buckets, and I did not feed them at all.
So you don't have to culture the phytoplankton, is what I was trying to say. I couldn't think of the word. So you don't need to culture phyto and culture pods. You can just culture pods if you use this species. It only works for fire dwarfs. Go ahead.
They can live on frozen. Basically, frozen. We always think of live foods to corals and stuff. Well, they can live off of the frozen varieties.
Sure.
In fact, the little light-colored things in my picture, those are a bunch of Apanamensis pods.
Let's make you big real quick. Right behind her. Those are some pods right there.
Yeah.
And Ray or Holly, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
So I was going to say, when I was doing copepods, I read on the internet how to raise them, and then I read in a Seahorse book how to raise them. And in the internet article, it talked about feeding them phyto paste, and it was mixed with, I think, distilled water. I'd make it in a 2-liter bottle for them. I'd make frozen cubes and just pour enough in to make the water green. Well, in the book, it talked about if you want to raise copepods outside, you just put the buckets outside and let them eat whatever food falls in the bucket. So I kept copepods outside during the spring and summer when it was warm enough, and I didn't even feed them at all. I just put the buckets outside, and tree crap would fall in there and whatever. And they were fine.
I have a question about that because actually, one of our huge breeders in England, Tom, I can't remember the last name right now, but anyways, he did the exact same. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry?
I think that's
Hornsby. Yes, Tom Hornsby. He used the exact same method, absolutely buckets outside. But my question to you guys is, if we're talking about copepods are a superior thing to feed because they have the DHA and all that, if they're just eating stuff from tree branches and outside in a bucket, how are they remaining to keep that DHA? If that question makes sense. Does it? No?
I figure if they're alive, they're healthy, they're getting what they need, whatever nutrition. So whatever's falling in there's got to be nutritious.
Yeah, the thing is, what you're losing, you are going to lose some nutritional value because, again, you're not going to have the HUFAs. And there were some of the chemicals that you want. When I do it, like I said, I got a 58-gallon old oceanic tank right now that's full of them.
Well, and I was
And
going
I
to say, I do know Tom Hornsby would pull the buckets inside during certain months. Ray, you just made the point that you tried
Yeah.
outdoors, but the culture was invaded by a mosquito larva. Yeah. So I would say,
I didn't know they could live in salt water. We have a lot of mosquito larvae here, but I never had them in my
Well,
in
it's
my
brackish
I ain't
water.
going after mosquito larvae. They get nasty.
mhm. But I
I
would say,
But no,
oh, go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was talking. Sorry. Zen, I wanted to go back to the Artemia in just a second for some other questions, but Zen said, I know adults don't really go for them sometimes because of the size, but do they like them as a treat once in a while if I did start a copepod culture tank or strictly for fry, really? I'm going to give my answer after you
I'd
guys.
say only fry. Only fry. Their copepods are teeny. My seahorses will not eat anything that teeny. They just won't.
I
the
agree.
thing is, it depends.
The dwarfs would. That's different. I mean, you got to differentiate because when you're talking erectus, you're talking a seahorse maybe this big. When you're talking a dwarf, they're like
Dwarfs
that.
will take
So
them for sure.
big difference.
And I know, Cheryl, you were working with
Yeah.
amphipods, which, you know, you guys know copepods are tiny, and then amphipods are, you can see them, they're a lot bigger. And I've never had a seahorse eat an amphipod either, just to be honest. But I know you were working on that, Cheryl, right?
I've grown amphipods, all kinds of. I've experimented with all kinds of invertebrates and stuff. In fact, the Apanamensis or pods were first came into the hobby in the early 70s when some people started experimenting with them. And back then, we didn't have real good luck raising them. We've gotten a lot better at it since then. But we did learn very rapidly that they make a wonderful food for either dwarf seahorses or
Fry.
young.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Fry. Yeah.
They're amazing and that answers the questions. Then it's really just for fry or dwarfs. That's it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, I've got 5 questions I want to go to right now, but I want to try to stay on topic. You guys were awesome tonight. This is a great conversation. But Coro said, I don't know about pods specifically, but DHA is an amino acid that can be synthesized in the body, just like taurine. I hope I said that right. Cats cannot synthesize taurine naturally, and they need to prey upon animals that can, like mice. That's why I was asking about like the bucket outside. I don't know if it requires, I don't know. Ray, any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm just, he was talking about people being able to manufacture their own DHA. Seahorses, like there's a few other saltwater fish, the same boat, cannot manufacture. They have no process within them that they can convert anything to DHA. So that's why it's important to digest it.
They have to eat it. They have to eat it.
Or they have to ingest it.
And we say, well, but to be fair, we say they have to eat it, but there are multiple kept seahorses, adults, I'm talking, on just frozen mysis.
Yeah, but mysis do have some DHA in it.
Oh, they have some. Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Some
thing
more
is,
than others. Depends where they come from, but they all have some to a degree. But
like San Francisco Bay, they're actually coming out of the ocean. It's probably not as heavily populated as some other ocean areas, but it has, you know, they have their own mysis shrimp that they sell that are typically smaller than the hikari. It's just,
Bonnie, I do see your question, and I'm so excited to jump to it, but I want to finish the other questions before. Please stay with us because I want answers about peroxide too. But Zen Ginger said, okay, then with freshwater fish, if you provide BVS even to large fish, it often encourages breeding because a live food is available for fry. would copepods possibly encourage seahorses to mate? So she's asking if the adult seahorses see copepods in the tank, if they would produce fry, like in my case, I want fry, they're not producing. If I put copepods in, would they say, oh, now there's food for my babies, let me spit out some fry?
It's hard to say what they would do. Usually, what I would do in that situation where they're not reproducing is move them into a live diet using the larger amphipods or types of shrimp, and see if I couldn't put some body weight on them and improve their nutritional plane. Because just there's obviously something missing if they're not reproducing. Maybe they're just all mad at each other. I don't know.
No, Cheryl, I agree with you, and that's my personal problem. I threw it in the mix. I shouldn't have, but you answered the question well. But I think the question that Zen was asking, and my answer to you, Zen, would be, I absolutely disagree that throwing copepods. Okay, my kids are brats. Shh. I would disagree that throwing copepods in a tank would encourage breeding. And the reason I say that is because I think when you talk about live foods encourage breeding, it's more about feeding the adults live foods that they eat that makes them, like Cheryl was saying,
Yep.
bulk them up, make them healthy, make them feel good, and then they want to produce. Whereas I don't think they're thinking about the fry. I mean, it's a good question, but I think also that I can tell you that my tank has copepods and they're not giving me fry. Okay, I'm so mad. But
You need to get
point
them
being,
some amphipods.
Or shut up, Cheryl. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I really didn't mean to say that, guys. I'm doing
Get them
that
some
jokingly.
amphipods and some shrimp, larger live shrimp.
Well, I was going to say she's making a great point, because using live foods like adult mysis and adult artemia enriched with a bunch of, ram-packed goodness in it, that will entice them to breed. But just having the copepods in the tank will not, because they won't eat them.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if they're not introduced to some of this stuff at a young age, they may not recognize some of it as actually edible.
Like mine.
Yeah.
They didn't get amphipods when they were babies. So as adults, when I tried to give them amphipods, they're like, what is that
exactly.
bug in here?
They'll look at them and they'll be like, what the hell's that? Is this something to play with?
I've actually had mine where they'll actually form a circle and trap amphipods in a circle and go into a feeding frenzy and start just grabbing them and swallowing them as fast as they can.
Well,
and I'm talking 10, 12, 15 at a time.
See, and another good point, Cheryl, is the thing is, it totally depends on your seahorses. We can sit here and say, adult erectus won't take copepods, and then yours might. I mean, it might. You just don't know. It depends on the situation, what's in the tank. They do like to hunt. So Jen, you were asking about. Hang on, you were asking about giving them a treat. I love to get my seahorses live mysids and, throw them, and they go wild and hopefully breed for me, but I've done that as the treat or enriched artemia. But I've noticed too, Holly, we kind of discussed, and then we got to go to Bonnie's question. But we've discussed before too, that sometimes we would take artemia, right? Like adults.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it's like I got a female.
Mine aren't too excited.
Well, I got a young female.
Especially the females will now and then take it more readily than the males will, I've noticed. But most of the time when I've tried to give them the adult artemia, it's not as exciting as I would hope it would be.
Not the frenzy that Cheryl talks about.
No.
I received a female going back 20 years ago. She came in with several others. Mm-hmm. She was very small, very shy. She would not come out to eat until everybody else had eaten their fill and left to go to another part of the tank. I mean, I'm dead serious, which means she was not getting any food. So I used these little bamboo skewers and started putting mysis shrimp, stick them on the end of it, and holding it in the back left corner of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
She figured it out. She started eating. She started gaining weight finally. The day I knew she'd had me was the day she saw me walking up to the tank, swam from the right front corner to the left back corner, and started food begging.
Yep.
She
Yep.
had,
Here's
she had
where
me
I eat.
trained. But the point is,
Yep.
up to that point, she was not getting the nutrition that she needed. She was too
Sure.
she was too squirrely to even eat when she first got there.
Depends on their personalities for sure. All right,
And then
guys.
she learned.
I was gonna say, look, this is a topic we could make an entire episode about. Just live feeding versus feeding
feeding.
versus dwarfs
Mhm.
versus fry versus erectus. If you want us to dive into more details, or if I missed any questions, you can either ask them again, or we can make a whole topic out of this and really dive into the details. But I do want to get to Bonnie's question because we're running on 9:20. Doesn't the peroxide kill the brine shrimp, and how much do you rinse them? I have an actual document for you,
No.
Bonnie, but let's discuss it first. Go
There's
ahead.
one. I actually have a formula right in front of me. This is what I used when I was raising fry. And I used for my peroxide because it was cheaper. The 40 volume clear peroxide you get at the beauty store has to be the clear, not the cream. But you take 60 milliliters to 1 liter of water, and then you would have 1.5 minutes of aeration, so an air pump with an air stone, and then 3.5 minutes with no aeration. And at the end of that, I would pour them into a little sieve that was sized for them, so that they didn't fall through, rinse them out, just rinsed it under the sink water, and then fed them to my fry.
And what does that
And that
do,
was
Holly?
my final step. It cleans off any bacteria that might be on those shrimp that could cause an infection in your seahorses.
Good answer. Ray, do you want to add to that? And actually, before you add to it, Holly, is this what we're talking about? Let's see if I can share properly here. Can you guys see it? Oh, no, hang on. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, clear developer. Yep.
So 40.
That's it.
And that seems crazy to use something from the salon, but it's
cheaper than, because if you buy regular hydrogen peroxide from the drugstore, I think you use a lot more, like a whole cup or a half a cup or something like that.
yep. And
Yeah.
the reason is because it's a higher strength.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
can also buy that. It's not as concentrated, so it's a little more expensive. But you can buy them in gallon bottles directly from the hair appointment stores, and
Yeah,
they're more expensive, but they're very easy to use. You don't have to go through all the measurements. But it's just they're definitely more expensive. But that's why we tell people go to.
And I actually use for my bottle, I use the hair color
Oh, geez.
measuring bottle to measure out my milliliter. They sell them in the beauty stores and it's milliliters. So it matches up for the measurements we use for the brine shrimp
That's
and
so
the
funny.
seahorses. So that's where I
Ray,
found
did you
those.
have anything else to add about the importance of the peroxide step, or why it's used, or any of that, or why it doesn't kill the artemia?
Well, it will if you use it strong enough, but if you use it in approved dosage, it'll kill the bacteria, but it won't kill the artemia.
And I think Dan told me it won't. Even I mean, like, unless you're drowning them in it. I mean,
Well, if he uses his 35%, it'll kill him, because my 25% killed him when I forgot what I was doing one day.
gotcha. Okay.
Anyway,
Well,
that link that I gave you, it's my brine shrimp page, and it's old. It hasn't been updated in a long time, but it does have Dan's post, a copy of Dan's post from the org on there, explaining
okay.
that he's using the the 35% and tells you how to make the conversion, how to do it if you're using 3%.
Very
Down near
good,
the
thank
bottom
you.
of the
Yeah.
And
fried shrimp
actually,
thing.
Dan and I worked on a document, but I posted your link. And if anybody needs the document, I can send you. But that link is great. And Ray, I think some people think, why are you doing that? Like, okay, so it might kill off some bacteria, but I've been raising brine shrimp and feeding it to my freshwater fish forever. Why with seahorses, whether they be fry or dwarfs or whatever, why do I need to enrich them and then clean them?
Seahorses
Why?
don't have an immune system that can handle much in the way of any bacteria load. And so if you've got some nasty bacteria that are getting through in the cultures of your brine shrimp, then and they pick it up, they aren't able to fight it off. Most saltwater fish are much better at fighting it off, and most freshwater fish also.
Yep. Great answer, perfect. And that's when I first started trying to raise fry guys, I kept failing. I'd keep 3 alive, 5 alive. And I'm talking about fry, but dwarf seahorses are the same equivalent, so to speak. And Dan finally said, let's look at your hatchery. Okay, because you're raising brine shrimp in what, a 2-liter bottle? Because that's what I was using. And he was like, let me see it. And he started pointing out, you've got like not a cut, but an indent there.
Scratching.
Yeah, scratches. Bacteria grows in those scratches. Kelly, are you cleaning your hatchery? Well, no. Why would I clean the hatchery? I just do a new batch, right? I mean, they're fine, they seem fine. And so, while Artemia can handle the awful conditions we're probably putting them in a 2-liter bottle, the seahorses can't. What grows on them, they can't handle. So that enrichment gives the seahorses the DHA that the Artemia doesn't have, and then the peroxide step cleans them so that this vitamin packed, DHA packed food hits the seahorses, but they don't get any of the bacteria that was in the process, right?
And that reminds me, I ran a bleach bucket every day when I was raising fry, and I had enough brine shrimp hatching equipment to where I'd rotated it out. So as soon as I cleaned out a hatchery or cones or whatever, they go in the bleach bucket. And then they get rinsed outside to dry, and I'm using new, clean, sterile material. Just rotate it
Great point.
through. So a lot
You did so much
cleaning.
better than me. I was slacking apparently, but I would also say, Bonnie, we thank the question, and I think just to get back to the overall question that we kind of been discussing tonight, I don't want to scare anybody, right? Because we try to dive into anything that's happened to us or what's worked for us, but there are plenty of people that feed adult seahorses frozen mysis for the duration of their lives, and they're great, right? People that have kept dwarf seahorses in many different situations and conditions. We're telling you, if you want to keep them long term, if you want to keep them healthy and happy and maybe breeding or not, we're telling you the best advice. That doesn't mean you can't still do it in a different way and show us how you did it, and then we learn something. That's how this community works, right? So we're not trying to say anybody don't do what you want to do. We're just trying to give you the best advice for what's worked for us and our experiences, and like our experts, what's worked for them for years and years and years. So just wanted to make that point because I don't want anybody discouraged ever. Keeping seahorses can be so simple. I mean, I know, Holly, we'll get into it and we'll talk about, oh man, the fry, we want them, but there's so much work, da da da. But adult seahorses,
they're just labor intensive, is what it is.
Ray made the great point when we first started talking. I don't care what species you're talking about. If you research and you talk to us, and you talk to other people in these seahorse groups, and you get good advice, and you set up properly, it's cake. It's that so many people don't set up properly, and then they have problems. And coming back from a problem is a lot harder them just doing the work to begin with.
Preventing it.
And so great point, Ray. And what else? I kind of got on my kick. Now I know I've missed some questions. I'm sorry. Oh, Bon, go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Go ahead, Cheryl.
there's other things that you do too as you go along that you realize most people wouldn't think of doing or trying, and you're not going to bring it out to somebody because it's just going to sound crazy. But you learn how to grow out the fry faster. You know how to get them to eat more. And a lot of it just has to do with the way your systems are set up. And
sure, yeah,
it's one of those things where you don't want to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at somebody that's just starting out.
Sure. And I feel like we do that sometimes, and I'm sorry if we do. I apologize. It's that our audience is so many different levels of newer, experience. But I would also say that's a good point too. If you're doing a dwarf Seahorse tank, you think it's going to be more convenient because it's smaller, they're easier, blah, blah, blah. If you don't have a sump and you don't have all that equipment, what do you think that means for you? It means a lot more water changes. A lot more. So you can do it, absolutely.
Like I said, at least it's a small tank, right?
Right. Well, but there's more risk involved.
Gallon.
There's more risk involved is my only point.
I guess what I'm saying is over time, as you learn more and become more competent in what you're doing with seahorses, you also are more willing to do some experiments and see if you can find other ways to further improve what you're doing.
Absolutely. Look at us with our char chambers now, or Robert King chambers. Yes.
Well, it's like years ago, I tried experimenting with running a very tiny blue light on my nurseries at night. Well, danged.
And
they go zipping in there, hunt a bunch of food, and then disappear for a couple of hours. And then they come back and they would feed all the way through the night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, think about that from a growth perspective.
Yeah. If they keep you, I don't know though. Don't they need to rest? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
But the thing is, they would take prolonged breaks because they had the 3/4 of the tank was pitch black.
So they could choose.
So they could go into the
to
light to feed, and then disappear and go back and sleep.
So I want to get. Sorry, go ahead, Holly.
No, I just thought that was interesting. So the seahorses had the choice of whether they wanted to go eat. They knew where to go eat under the light. But if they felt like resting, they could go. Well,
and what I found was literally they would make these real quick 10, 15-minute feeding frenzies. Then they disappear and they'd be gone for several hours.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing this all through the night. And those
which is better and more like their natural environment. Eat when they want to.
See,
right?
the blue light gives them the moonlight, so it's not like it's a bright like a white light.
Great.
And I experimented with colors and stuff, and I was like, "Wow, that's really cool. I'm liking this one." But it's just goofy things
as you do it.
Yeah,
absolutely. I did want to go back to Coral Works' question. Seahorses like to stay hitched while they feed, right? So you have to either target feed or feed a whole cloud to ensure they access the food without having to hunt for it. Who wants to disagree with that?
Dwarfs, yeah. Standards, no.
Okay, what do you mean? So dwarf seahorses won't hunt food?
Dwarfs, for the most part, you will have occasional ones that will hunt food or some that will hunt food occasionally, but by and large, plan on them not hunting their food. So they need a food density sufficient for them to get enough food that's passing by while they're hit. They can snick it up that way. Your standards have no need of a density like that. They will hunt down the food.
The adults love to hunt, but Ray, I have a question. And full disclosure here, guys. I've never kept dwarfs. Kept fry, but never dwarfs. So I'm asking right along with you guys. I don't know. But I know Lucy was pretty much a dwarf seahorse expert. And one of her tricks, how to set up a dwarf seahorse tank video that you guys can still watch. It's still valid. She used a light so that like kind of like what Cheryl was saying with the moonlight, but she used a light, and when she
To
would
draw
feed,
the
she would
food.
turn the light on. She'd give the dwarf seahorses time to realize, okay, that light's on, something's going to happen over here. She'd put
Food.
the Artemia right in the light, and the Artemia would stay at the light, and the dwarfs would go eat. So
Yeah.
she fed them in the spot that she wanted.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, what you're saying, Ray, doesn't coincide with that, right?
I can't,
But if they had places to sit down there,
No.
like they could sit
No,
there and
in the
eat,
video, Lucy shows the
they were
light
just
was in the
swimming and
upper
eating, huh?
right hand corner of the tank, and the big
Mhm.
fake plant looking thing that they lived on or hitched to all the time was
Was
over on the
over
other
on
side.
the other
And they would
side,
all
huh?
swim over and eat,
Interesting.
and not hunting for sure. I
I'm
agree,
just
dwarves
assuming
don't hunt.
that it's possible that they could be trained to do that. It's not a natural,
They learn.
it's not a natural instinct for them. But I've
Good
never
point.
tried it, so I can't say anything against it. But I respect Lucy and
Sure.
what she
Yeah.
said.
Well, no, I think your point was
Mhm.
good though, Ray. For anyone starting out with dwarf seahorses, they need the density. So you're going to have to like fill that tank with food and let them sit there and not hunt and eat it. For sure, I agree with that. You can train them, but if you're new and starting out,
It's probably kind of like training them to
right?
use a dish. Like I feed my seahorses in dishes, and yeah, they learn that. So I imagine you could teach
Whereas
them
I'm
that
so
once
glad
they
that
figure
Holly said
out.
that, because I'll tell you, I don't think I've ever had. I had Barbories, and they were very picky and prissy, and they would only eat one shrimp at a time, and I did have to target feed. But every other species and individual that I've kept, they prefer to hunt. Like they don't even like it if it's just sitting in a dish. Holly uses dishes, it works for her, just shows works for different people. My seahorses, no, no dishes. They want it to be flying around. They want it to be moving. They want it, or like picking it up under a rock, finding it. They love hunting. So different seahorses. Who
For
knows?
me, it was a case of doing the broadcast feeding work better because some would train to eat out of the dish, some wouldn't. And I'd be damned if I was going to do both methods.
So you made them all eat. Tough love does work with seahorses, believe it or not. They come around. They're not going to starve.
Knows
So.
them, they don't jump.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And then I did want to cover one more question. We're hitting 9:37. Okay, she had two more questions. All right. So I read that if you, Bonnie asked, I read that if you convert black mollies to saltwater and breed them and let their fright feed the large seahorses to entice them to breed. Thoughts? I have a thought actually on this one.
No reputable long-term keeper would ever recommend that.
Why?
Well, first of all, I know of no way that feeding Molly Fry to seahorses is going to entice them to breed.
Okay.
If that was the case, then why Molly Fry? Why not feed them just live food and get them to breed that way? You have a
But that
better
is the
chance.
case, though, right? Wait, hang on. Before you move on, that is the case, though. Feeding
No,
adult
sometimes
seahorses
it
live
can
foods
happen,
does
but it's like
entice
a
them to breed.
placebo.
Wait, sorry, what?
It's like a placebo when you're doing meds. Some people swear by something working for them when in fact it's only because they're the type of person that placebos will work, and a placebo is not the real medicine. Well, in this case here, some seahorses may coincidentally start to produce fry after people introduce the live food, but there is no study that's ever been done to prove that that is something that will happen if you give them the live food.
So what you're saying is it matters what the live food is and what is included in the live food. So you're saying it goes back to
Yeah.
DHA.
No, just feeding them live food alone is not going to be enough. You're going to have to do something like change temperature, change the lighting period, something in addition to your live food. But in my case, I could make those other changes without doing the live food, even though I had the live food there, but I could do it and entice the breeding just by making other changes. You had to experiment a bit. But the other thing with your mollies, those molly fry do not have DHA. They are not sufficient to give proper nutrition to the seahorses.
I was just, my only comment on that was I actually tried that, Bonnie. I put mollies in, I think, my second Erectus seahorse tank. Everything went fine. I didn't have problems because they were freshwater, so they didn't bring disease, right? I were slowly. They did have fry in the tank. The seahorses would eat them. I would absolutely not say it enticed breeding because, well, my seahorses were already breeding in that tank. So I couldn't say that for sure. I agree with what Ray's saying that, it's not a good method, like if that's your goal, because they don't provide the nutrition that the seahorses need, but as just I don't want to say placebo, but like a trick to them, like, oh, we've got live food. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just think it depends on your goals. And I think Ray's right.
Well,
It's not going to accomplish your goals if your goal is breeding. I wouldn't put mollies in the tank that I'm trying to get breeders to breed in. So
the different species also tend to have somewhat different hunting strategies. It's like combs I call rock crawlers for a reason, because they use the tip of their tail as a pole fast, and they literally will go through and search every hole in a darn rock and while they're looking for food. I've never seen red-eye or erectus do that. Engines, on the other hand, continually throughout the day for hours.
Oh my gosh. I've watched Erectus sit there and hunt rocks and peek in holes and try to find food.
Wow.
I mean, I know what you're saying though. I didn't mean to disagree, Cheryl. I know combs have a different personality and they're more likely to do that. Sorry, go ahead.
And it's like my engines were completely different. Engines are like, I'm going to stay hitched. The food will get here eventually.
Right. Sure.
But I guess what I'm saying is they have different personalities, not only between, but within species.
Sure.
And you have to pay attention to that kind of stuff too when you're working with them.
Sure. Ray?
Yeah, they do all have different personalities. For instance, most seahorses, you would say, if it's laying on the ground, that's not a good thing. Well, I've had a few that like to sleep that way. They just like to sleep that way, and they wake up and come have breakfast, but they like to sleep.
And I've never seen that, you guys, so don't expect that. I've never had seahorses that sleep on the ground.
Heather had one too. She used to post it. She's all this. I said, I have one that does
You just
that
never know.
too. And she lay flat on the ground with her face under a rock.
Oh, nuts.
Just always like that same place every night. And Dandy likes to sleep. Well,
But
I expect
were they
him to
hunting?
because he's handy.
Were they hunting for food when they
But
crawled?
he's
No.
Like,
Actually, no. Now that she said that, I'm remembering Aphrodite did that at first. She doesn't now, but when I first got her, remember I told you, I thought she was dead because
oh yeah, well no, some of them will
I
lay
walked
down
up
to
to the
sleep,
tank and her head
and
was
they
under
don't
a rock,
always.
and I'm like, oh my God, did she get smushed? What the hell? And I went and I started to investigate, and here she comes. What's wrong? What's up?
Yeah, I was
leave me alone.
sleeping, Mom.
So you just
Don't
never
mess
know.
with me.
But hey, real quick, Ray, I feel like I cut you off earlier. Were you trying to finish some other? You probably don't remember.
I don't
Okay.
remember what we were talking about.
All right.
Talking to
Sorry.
impairment. How the hell do you expect me to remember?
Well, you need to start being like, don't cut me off, Kelly, because we were talking about mollies, but we got deeper.
I got a hard time trying to cut in.
I know. Ray's the only macho man that comes and battles us women for a space to talk. We have much respect for Ray. Any of you other boys, you need to get in here and back him up. But what was the last question from Bonnie? I looked at my planted tank, but do seahorses ever jump out of the tank?
Never.
No, they don't jump. They might jump like they're startled like that, but they don't go
I
anywhere.
get the question. They're not like, well, I can't even think of a fish that
Firefish.
does, but firefish. Thank you. That you have to have a lid.
No,
Cleaner
they won't
fish.
jump out of a
But I
tank.
will tell you this. I have multiple current seahorses that like to sleep and terrify the shit out of me, where they're almost, which I'd have to show you guys a picture, and I
Underwater.
can't like in the spur of the moment. But if you've seen my tank
They're
before,
up
I have
high.
it's a 40-gallon all-in-one. So there's two lock lines that come out. One's pointed up,
Mhm.
one's pointed kind of in between, and they like to sleep where their heads are almost out of the water. I mean, literally, I'm like, they're blowing bubbles out of the water.
What's really funny is when they squirt. If they are sitting at the surface, their head
Yep.
will be out of the water, the top part of their head, and water squirts out the
I think-
top of
I
their
think
head when
Cheryl,
they.
you told a story about
I
that
think
too.
it's so
Didn't you get
cute.
squirted,
What's even
Cheryl?
funnier
It's
is
so cute. I feel that.
What's even funnier is when you're trying to do a pouch evac and the male decides to prove to you that he
Oh,
can
that was it.
deflate his pouch in your face.
That was it. That was
I
it.
can do it myself.
But so
I've had
I
that
guess
happen too.
But
I guess the answer is, Bonnie, you don't need a lid. In fact, I actually discourage a lid on a seahorse
they
tank
won't get out.
because oxygen exchange is so important, right? So more
Yeah, you
surface
can leave
area
it
you
open.
have that's hitting the water, air's hitting the water, that's better. And like I said, in all of my tanks, I make sure there's like a waterfall coming in some way. And I also have airlines and all that so that I have that oxygen
of
exchange
motion.
going on. So you don't want a lid cutting them off. I think Holly, you have a tank with a lid, but it's different. Okay.
No, not anymore.
Yeah.
I took
So
it
there's
off.
no need for it.
But I did have
You could
It's
get
not going
away
to kill
with
them, but
egg
there's no
crate
need
on
for it.
top if you really had a problem with something. If you
What,
had
Ray?
companion fishing with seahorses that was a jumper, you could put egg crate over the top because that gives
Sure.
you the exposure to get the air gas exchange.
Yep. Agree. But yeah. And thank you, Bonnie, for coming. She said thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you, Cheryl, Holly, and Ray, for coming and chatting with me and sharing all your experiences. And thank you to everyone who came tonight, Coral Works, all of you guys, and to Zen Ginger, everybody who comes and asks questions. That's what makes this fun, right? We want to have fun with this, and we want to help people, but also be a community where we help each other. So whatever you decide to do in your tanks, Stephen, make sure you come back and let us know. We'd love for you to come on the show and share what you decide to do, because there's nothing wrong with doing Zosteroid tanks or dwarf tanks. I was too nervous to do one myself because it's so much work. But here I am wanting fry, right? So I'm ridiculous. Just ignore me. But I like watching them grow. Like with dwarfs, they never grow up.
I had them briefly, and I'll tell you, the dwarfs, they're awfully cute. They're really tiny. They're only about an inch
Yeah.
when they're big. And I only had mine, I want to say, less than a month, because the source I got them from sent them to me along with friends.
Oh.
Like the friends were like snails and caulerpa and other little creatures and things to live with them. But the problem was, if all that stuff brought
Yep.
in hydroids, and the hydroids wiped them out within like a few weeks.
Oh,
And
sure.
hydroids are about
Yep.
impossible to get rid of. So you want to just make sure wherever you get your dwarves and whatever you put
Is
with
clean.
them, make sure you get a good source and everything's really sterile, and don't throw any other stuff from anywhere else in there with them, because they're so small and so delicate that anything can
Yeah.
take them
Yeah.
out.
And don't make the
Any
mistake that I
foreign
made when I had my dwarfs. I was selling off all the fry because I had so many of them. And I started off, I forget now, maybe a dozen, and it didn't take long to get up to 50 in the tank. The
Sure.
only problem is I kept on selling these off, and dwarfs normally are only going to live a year and a half to 2 years, some a little bit over 2, but they stop producing quite early. Here I am selling off all
Oh,
these dwarfs, and all of a sudden, what I have there quits
you can
producing.
have,
Oh man.
Well,
So then they're going.
oh,
but the
I was
thing
gonna
was,
say.
when I got to just over 2 years when the last one went, by that time I was tired of them anyway.
Sure.
yeah, they're a
I,
lot of work.
I was
They're a lot
raising
more work than the
seahorse
larger
fry.
seahorses.
Yeah, I was raising reed-eye fry at the time,
Yeah.
and so with the reed-eye fry and the dwarfs too, it was just too much.
Yeah, that's a
And
lot.
my
And I was
preference
gonna
was to
say
keep
yeah,
too,
I
the
the
can
thing
reed-eye.
about
imagine.
the thing, and I'm not trying to discourage anyone. I think every seahorse tank is awesome. And if you try to do it and you do your research and you set up properly and you keep them, that's awesome. But like for me, I keep seahorses because I love them and they're my little babies. And my kids even get jealous because I'm like, oh, go away. It's seahorse time. I got to feed the seahorse, whatever. But also, I've had people walk in my house and they're like, oh my God, is that a sea? Because
Wow. Yeah,
they're this big. And as soon as you walk in and they swim up
yeah,
and they
they're
want
bigger
fed,
than people expect.
they're magical. Whereas dwarf seahorses, you look, what's in there? What? Yeah, you can't even find
Give
it.
me a magnifying glass.
Right. So just depending on if you just want to do it, hey, do it. It's extra work, but do it. But if you want like the magical experience, just do adult erectus. I mean,
They're
they're
really
awesome.
cute though. And the
They
cool
are
thing
cute.
about dwarfs, the babies can live with them. You don't have to separate the babies out like you do with the big seahorses.
Great point,
Yeah,
Holly.
but you
Babies
still have to feed them
can
the
live
same.
the dwarf. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you're already feeding the dwarfs like you
But
would.
you're already feeding that tank.
So you get to see the reproduction and the little teeny tiny fry, and you don't have to go through
Yeah.
removing them and putting them in a separate. Yeah, great point. Great point. I love it. But, anyways, for tonight, I think we did cover all the questions. I hope so. Oh, wait. Zen said, oh, now I'm getting text. Personally, I want to be discouraged if it's not typically successful. Sure, I like to push boundaries and see what I can get away with, but not something I'm brand new at. Right. So, again, if you just want to keep seahorses, go with erectus, set up properly, make sure there's, an oversized scammer. We've gone through it. We'll go through it again. But
Yeah.
it's not hard to just keep seahorses. We dive into, well, if this is a problem, this is how you solve it, or this is how you set up and go through all we disagree sometimes, right? Because Ray might think something different than me. Ray's got a lot more experience, by the way, but I'm just saying that's
Oh, I have something new.
okay.
I
Go
forgot. I
ahead.
got my new filter socks.
Okay.
And they're little, which is cool. They fit my sump better because I have actually several sizes of socks because when I bought them originally, when I got the sump, I didn't really know they came in different sizes.
Right.
So I ended up, this is one of my old ones, and you can see
Yeah.
they're starting to break, split apart. And then I have some that are really long, but they hang down so far they touch the floor
Oh yeah.
in my
Not
sump.
good.
And so I found this time I knew to measure and look. So I went on Bulk Reef Supply was having a sale. So I got new socks and they're shorter. So they fit inside the sump.
Those
better.
are mini.
So I'm about to grab something to show you guys real quick before we end. So chit chat. Hang on. Be right back. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, so I have show you these other ones. I have these ones that are super long that they're a good quality, but when they sit in my sump, they're like this. because they're too long. But I mean, they work. But once I figured out that they come in different sizes, because I don't have anywhere near me that sells
Yeah.
them where I can look at them, right? I ordered them online. I think my first batch of them came from Amazon, and I didn't really pay attention,
Yeah, of the
I think,
size.
to the other than the ring part is 4 inches. I knew that, but I'm like, oh, longer is better. And then they're sitting in the sun, and I'm like, that's too long. But they worked for years. I've had them for a couple years, but the rings are starting to crack. They're starting to get wore out. So I got a bunch of new
Crazy glue
ones.
works on those rings.
Oh, does it?
Well,
So here's my
just apply.
I was going to turn them into ghosts for Halloween, though.
There you go.
Glue some little eyes on them
Well,
right here.
for
Cut
that,
off the ring and make it like.
there's fabric glue that you can put a patch over it.
So here's my problem, guys.
Yeah.
This is the rounded corner of the all-in-one space
Oh.
where my sock goes. So I literally have to buy
So it's a
specific
different
socks.
shape.
Yep,
Oh,
that have that.
Oh, okay. That
Yep,
shape.
it's a pain in the butt. It makes me so
And
mad.
not everybody makes them, probably.
Nope.
It's just the maker of that
Yep.
cake, I bet. They got
And I bought a whole bunch of socks thinking I'm on it, and none of them work because I mean, you think about it, you could put a round one in there, but the water's gonna go through. What's the point? It doesn't work.
It's like
It's
household
not gonna work
appliances.
right.
They don't make the big money on selling you the appliance. They make the big money on what you need to maintain it, like filters and that are
Yep.
specific to it.
Oh, somebody's seeing the
Yeah.
creepy head. Yeah.
Oh wait, Holly's decoration. What are we looking at, Holly? Oh shit. Lovely.
That's called a shrunken head.
Yeah. All right, that's enough of you.
But wait a minute, Bonnie, you saw that? I did not even notice it. So she's had a head behind her the whole time. Oh shit.
Did I turn it?
Lovely.
I hope I did.
Holly always goes all out.
It's
in her
off when it
eggs and
finishes.
in her
It'll turn
house.
off. Yeah, I have a lot of. I've decorated for Halloween. It's one of my favorite holidays.
I wish I did better, but I'm right there with you, Bonnie. Hey guys, tonight, is there anything else for tonight? I am going to try to end it. We're hitting 10 o'clock. Anything else from anybody? Of course, we'll be back next week. We love the contributions this week. Having this conversation back and forth really helps and makes it more like a community and more fun. So thank you so much to everybody who came. But do we have anything else for tonight, guys?
Nothing this
Or are we
end.
good? Okay. All right. Well, then let's say Happy Wine Wednesday, and we'll see you next week.
Happy wine.
Night all.
Everybody say cheers. Happy Wine Wednesday.